Welcome into Denton's office, your favorite Commanders YouTube show. The Combine is coming up this week. We're going to do some stuff on that later in the week right here on the Team 980's YouTube channel. But that to me signifies the start of the 2025 season. We've already been in off-season mode for a couple of weeks, but we might as well make it official. How do we make it official? We come up with the checklist for the Commanders in the 2025 offseason. So I got mine. I want yours down below. Give me your offseason checklist in the comments. You can also tweet me at the Denton Day. You see it on the whiteboard. I got a whiteboard because only important people have whiteboards. If you're not subscribed to the Team 980's YouTube channel, be sure that you do that now. It's going to be simple. This is going to be easy to digest, and I would argue it's the best offseason checklist that there is out there. But again, you can disagree below in the comments. I got 5 things for you. I got 5 things. Let me show you the thumb there. I got 5 things. We're going to start with number 1. This to me should be the obvious one, but I know it won't be. I grew up in Loudoun County, Virginia. Shocking. I know. When I grew up in Loudoun County, Virginia, growing up, I drive around on Route 50. It sucked, but I drove around on Route 50 because I was in that Stone Ridge South Riding area. And every time I drive on Route 50, there would be signs that say, "Don't Fairfax Loudoun County." Now, I'm not going to get into the political aspects of what that means, but I'm going to use that here for my first thing on the checklist. Don't 2006 the 2025 offseason. 2006 was arguably the worst offseason in the Dan Snyder era. If you're going to ask Commanders fans, Redskins fans about Dan Snyder and his free agent frenzy, you might get older fans that are going to say Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith, those signings sucked. You might get fans that say Albert Haynesworth sucked. All of them are true, by the way. None of them were spectacular, and none of them did what they were promised to do. But I would argue that 2006 was the worst of the bunch because Dan Snyder had a little bit of success, and then he splurged, and he splurged, and he splurged, and it was obnoxious. They reset the market with Adam Archuleta, giving him a 6-year, $30 million contract. Now, these are 2006 prices. I would love to pay a safety that in 2025. But in 2006, that was a big deal. Antoine Randall was in negotiations with the Bears for a 6-year, $18 million contract. That fell through, and then Dan Snyder turned around and gave him 7 years, $31 million. Guess who didn't play here for 7 years? You guessed it, Antoine Randall. The Brandon Lloyd trade was an absolute disaster. Statistically, he had one of the worst seasons that a starting wide receiver has ever had. He played 15 games. He caught 23 passes. Guess how many went into the end zone? If you guessed 0, you would be correct. They got the TJ Duckett acquisition. He ran for 132 yards here. That's it. That's literally it. 132 yards on like 38 carries. That's 3.5 yards a pop, which I guess is okay, but it still wasn't good considering the magnitude of what that signing was supposed to be. They also brought in Andre Carter. And no one's going to say a damn bad word about Andre Carter. That was the one that actually ended up being pretty all right for Dan Snyder. But it's imperative that after a little bit of success that they had in 2025, that they don't do that. That they don't just splurge and pay all of this money to all of these dudes that they don't really know whether or not they're going to work out. Now, I do just want to preference this because this is going to be into my next point. I don't think that going after Myles Garrett would fall into that. I can understand why you might, but it's important to point out that Myles Garrett is literally a first ballot Hall of Famer now. And he is still in what you would consider to be the prime of his career, whereas Adam Archuleta was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Brandon Lloyd was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Randall threw a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl. That was sick, but he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. In 2006, it's important. Not only did they splurge money, but they splurged money on guys that were relatively mid. Going after Myles Garrett, who is not mid, is not the same as that. I just want to put that out there. What I would consider to be going 2006, if you will, is spending a lot of money on, respectfully, a guy like a Darius Slayton. Or if Christian Kirk gets cut in Jacksonville, doing what Jacksonville did and splurging a lot of the money on a guy like Christian Kirk. I'm not saying don't spend money. Money is meant to be spent in the NFL. You have it for a select amount of time. You got to spend it in that window, but you got to make sure you're spending it on guys that are actually deserving of the money, not what happened in 2006. Number 2 on my list, get a guy on the edge. As it relates to personnel, this is the top priority for me this offseason if I were to be Adam Peters. You lost in the NFC Championship game because defensively you could not hang. Philadelphia's offense was stacked to the gills, fact. Also, fact. You couldn't do anything to stop them. You couldn't get pressure on Jalen Hurts. You couldn't stop the run. Is that exclusively because you didn't have an edge? Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it is. People are going to point fingers at different guys. They'll point fingers at the linebacker crew. They'll point fingers at John Allen and Daron Payne. And to an extent, all of these guys deserve a little bit of blame in the what ended up being a beatdown in the NFC Championship game. But really, what it comes down to is if you have a guy on the edge that's a game wrecker, a lot of the problems are at least much more manageable. Not fixed, but much more manageable. And Myles Garrett is a guy that fixes a lot of those problems. If you don't want to pay the necessary, shall we say, assets and money to go get Myles Garrett, there are going to be other guys available that could still be considered game wreckers. Max Crosby is an option. Matthew Judon might be available. That is an option. You don't have to get the first ballot Hall of Famer, so to speak, but you got to get somebody that can get after the passer and not be a liability in the run game. You had Dante Fowler, who had double-digit sacks, which was awesome, but he only played 16 snaps in the NFC Championship game because he can't play the run. You can't have that. You have to go out there and get somebody that can do both of those things. That could be in the draft, that could be through trade. I don't really care the avenue. I'm not picky here. I just want somebody that's going to make defense a lot more enjoyable to watch and not have me watching like a soccer mom through finger goggles, right? So you have to go get somebody on the edge to solidify that position and make everybody's life on defense significantly easier. Point number 3 on the checklist for the Commanders in 2025. On the flip side, get a tackle. Tighten up the trenches for Jayden Daniels to protect him. Brandon Coleman, I thought, he was good this year. He wasn't great, but he also wasn't bad. He was good. He was a rookie. Not every rookie is going to turn into Jayden Daniels. That's just a fact, right? I don't know if I know for sure that he is the left tackle of the future, but I also know that I'm not totally out on him being the left tackle of the future. What I do know is that you can still get better at that position. Maybe you don't love Andrew Wiley in 2025. Well, you got to have someone to play that position. I think Corn Lucas coming back should be a priority for this team. I thought he was really, really good when they asked him to play. So having him in the building for a little bit of depth would definitely get a double thumbs up from old Denton Day over here. But you need to get a tackle. You need to win the trenches. If the understanding is that Philadelphia is going to be good for a long time and you want to get to where they are, what were they particularly good at this year? They had badasses on defense that you're going to have to block, and it was really tough to go after them because they had badasses on offense that then did the blocking and opened up holes for Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts and gave him tons of time. You need to do that. You need to find ways to do that. And if you end up drafting a guy that you think is really, really good and maybe a little bit better for the left tackle position than Brandon Coleman, shift him to right tackle, shift him to left guard, put him at right guard while Sam Cosmi is on the mend from his knee injury. Like there are a lot of different ways you can go with this, but you've got to get somebody in the trenches to continue to keep Jayden Daniels upright. Wide receiver is going to be on this list. In fact, it's coming next. But it doesn't matter who you have out there at wide receiver. You could throw Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, and Terry McLaurin out there with Randy Moss in there as well. If Jayden doesn't have time, it doesn't really matter. So you got to make sure that you tighten up the trenches, bolster the trenches to make sure that Jayden Daniels has protection. Now, number 4 on this list is getting Terry McLaurin some help on the outside. I've seen all over social media, there's been a lot of people in the fan base suggesting that wide receiver is not a top priority. It's not as important as the edge and the offensive line position, certainly. But to say it's not a priority, did you watch the Atlanta game? Did you watch a lot of these games late in the season when teams started to realize that Terry McLaurin is the only real big play threat on this offense? We're going to bracket him. We're going to put a good corner on him, and we're going to always have help over the top. It's going to be next to impossible. I'm not saying you got to go out there and pay Chris Godwin millions and millions of dollars, though admittedly, I would love it if Chris Godwin was on this team. But you have to get somebody else out there that is consistently a threat to stop the bracketing, to make Terry's life a little bit easier, to then make Jaden Daniels' life a little bit easier. There's no such thing as having too many weapons on offense, right? That has never been a problem for most NFL teams as long as everybody is on the same page and they're in line with the culture element of this. Get as many weapons as possible. This can be through free agency. The draft is very, very deep when it comes to wide receiver this year. So you can get guys second round, third round, fourth round, maybe even fifth round that can then come in and make plays for you. De'Ami Brown's going to get overpaid by somebody. I'd prefer to not make it the Commanders. He played really well in the first two games of the postseason, but I don't know that that justifies overpaying him to stay. That would feel a little 2006-ish. So if he's going to demand money that you're not comfortable paying, don't pay him. I'd love Noah Brown to come back. But the thing with Noah Brown is like a fine wide receiver two, but he's a really, really good wide receiver three. So if you keep Noah Brown, put him at wide receiver three, and then go and get somebody else to play wide receiver two, to play in the slot. I mean, God help me if Luther Burden is available at 29th overall. I know a lot of people want edge or tackle in the draft, but if a guy like Luther Burden falls to 29, you take him. He's your slot guy for years to come. You just have to get more weapons on offense. It's going to make everything a lot easier for Jaden Daniels and a lot easier for us. And that's where I get to my final point. You got to get a running back with vision. Eckler is going to be here. He signed a 2-year deal. I'm excited about that. When Eckler played and when he was the focal point of the offense, I thought the offense was at its best. But it was clear as day. Helen Keller is watching the television saying, man, the Commanders' running backs cannot run very well. They can't see the holes that they need to be running through. It became a bit of a problem. I don't know if the yips or a thing that happened as a running back, but Brian Robinson towards the end of the season was not seeing things the way that he needed to. It should have been so easy for him to have 1,000 yards when you're playing alongside a guy like Jaden Daniels, because everybody is terrified of Jaden Daniels. That's how Alfred Morris had the best season of his career in 2012. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't the case with B-Rob. And that stinks. He's been a really good player here, but you have to evaluate that position with a critical eye, not do a little bit of a homerism, not do the emotional bit, evaluate it with a critical eye. This is a deep class for running backs. The draft is going to be fun because this is a deep class for every position of need for the Commanders. Tackle, defensive edge, wide receiver, running back. The positions that we constantly talk about wanting to get better at, you can get better at in the third, fourth, and fifth round of this year's draft, which is going to allow Adam Peters to get in the kitchen and cook it up a little bit. So maybe not sell the farm to go get a guy like Myles Garrett in terms of selling all these draft picks, because you can then go get guys that you will be able to plug in and make your team better almost immediately. So those are my five. Don't 2006 to 2025 offseason. Get an edge, get a tackle, get a wide receiver two that you're comfortable with, and then go get a playmaker at the running back spot. If I missed anything, hit me down below in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at the Denton Day. We got some offseason, some combine stuff coming later this week. Incredibly excited about that. Appreciate you tuning in, stepping into my office, but respectfully, it's time for you to get out.